Systemic gas exchange is also known as internal respiration, and it's the movement of gases between the respiring tissue and the plasma in the systemic capillaries. Now, I want to explain the diagram behind me, and then I'm going to explain what's actually happening with the gases. What I've drawn here, these purple lines represent the systemic capillary, the walls of the systemic capillary, so it's flowing up and down. Inside the capillary is a red blood cell, and that red blood cell is surrounded by the liquid portion of blood, which is the plasma. On the outside of the capillary wall, there are cells and interstitial fluid, and inside the cells, there is the process of cellular respiration taking place. So let's start there. Cells that are producing ATP, that are metabolically active, take oxygen, use it to break down glucose, produce ATP, water, and carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide diffuses out of the cell into the interstitial space across the capillary wall, and then travels through the bloodstream to reach the lungs, which we'll talk about next, in one of four forms. So it can either just diffuse across and stay as it is, dissolved carbon dioxide in the plasma, or it can hitch a ride on a protein in the plasma, such as albumin, and here it just attaches to the amino acids. It can also cross into the red blood cell and hitch a ride on a very special protein known as hemoglobin, which the red blood cells are packed with, and this is what most of the carbon dioxide does, or the carbon dioxide can enter the red blood cell where an enzyme known as carbonic anhydrase combines the carbon dioxide with water to produce carbonic acid, which then splits to form a proton and a bicarbonate ion. So recall that according to the law of mass action, if we put more reactants on this side, the reaction is going to move in this direction. So this means that the more carbon dioxide is produced, the more this reaction will go and produce these products. Now, let's look at what happens here. The bicarbonate ion is sent outside of the red blood cell in exchange for chloride. The reason that we need to get rid of the bicarbonate is because we're also getting rid of the proton. We'll talk about that in a moment. And this is like opening the drain on the bathtub. In other words, we're putting in more CO2 so the reaction moves this way, but we're also taking away the products so that the reaction moves this way. And that encourages carbon dioxide to come out of the tissue and come into the red blood cell, the fact that this reaction continues to move in this direction. So the bicarbonate is exchanged for chloride. The fact that they are both negative means that it doesn't affect the resting membrane potential. And this is called the chloride shift. So every time we're in systemic gas exchange, chloride moves into the red blood cell. When we get to alveolar gas exchange, we're going to see the chloride move back out of the red blood cell. So the chloride concentration is actually different in the plasma and the red blood cell depending on where you're doing the exchange. Now the proton interacts with hemoglobin, which is abbreviated HB, that has bound to oxygen. This is called oxyhemoglobin. And what happens is that as soon as hemoglobin sees that proton, it suddenly becomes much less interested in oxygen. It's got a bit of a wandering eye, if you know what I mean. So as soon as the proton shows up, hemoglobin is like, see you later, oxygen. It's been great knowing you, but I'm moving on and I'm going to hang out with this proton. And then hemoglobin becomes deoxyhemoglobin when it binds the proton, and it releases oxygen. The oxygen diffuses out of the red blood cell and goes into the respiring tissue, where it is used to break down glucose, produce ATP and water and carbon dioxide goes back into the next red blood cell and helps to drive the release of oxygen. So what you can see if you think about this is that the more active the tissue is, the more carbon dioxide it produces. The more carbon dioxide it produces, the more protons and bicarbonate get produced. The more of these that get produced, the more oxygen gets released, and the more oxygen the tissue gets. So this is how the red blood cell and the chemical reactions that take place inside match the needs of the respiring tissue to the gas that's actually being exchanged.